to spend quality time now, just because, you know, this space and place that I've decided to open up for myself to share and others to share was really inspired by, and the catalyst behind all of that was psychedelics. Yeah. So I do want to spend some quality time talking about that. And and I'll start with, where would I start? I'll just start with, how did you get introduced to psychedelics? You know, coming from you know, young British, moving to Ghana, coming back to the UK. I do know my first introductions to hearing about psychedelics was in the Camden area, through going to school with the guys I went to school with in the Camden area. But you know, how did you first come and hear about psychedelics? What was your perspective view on it? And how did you get to a point where you're partaking in it and now encouraging people to partake in it? So let's go there.
I mean, it's funny actually, because going to school on Hampstead Heath, there was this funny thing that in the summer, I mean in the autumn, there was always this story about the sixth formers on the Heath picking mushrooms. Yeah. But I think it actually, I was really sort of like quite innocent actually. You know, I came from such a tight-knit Ghanaian family, and then in primary school and in secondary school, the people that I hang around with also came from kind of like quite tight-knit immigrant families. So my friends were the Asians, the Greeks. There was only a few of us Africans and Caribbeans. I think there was maybe like in my whole year, maybe 4 or 5. So that particular group of people, I think we were the squares. You know, we didn't smoke cigarettes, we weren't allowed out, all of that kind of stuff. So hearing about the sixth formers picking mushrooms, I think it actually took quite a while to even realize that it was something that did something to somebody. I didn't even know. So I think when I was about 15 and I was sewing, and I would sew for sixth formers, that's when I got to hear there was actually this artist. It came to my mind after we talked the other day. I'd forgotten about him. There was this artist who drew mad artwork, and he was one of the early people, I don't know what he does now, he was one of the early people who used to do flyers for parties, because his artwork was just mad. And he's the person, about him, that I heard about taking these mushrooms. You would see things and it came out in his art. So, but it was still something other people were doing. I think the most I ever did at that stage was, and it took ages for me to even find the person who had some weed for me to have my first toke on a joint when I was about 16. So, you know, these were things that had nothing to do with me. And when you talk about psychedelics and when you were young, I so completely understand. You know, this was the behavior of these unruly white people who are just off doing all this strange stuff. But when I was 19 and I got into going to festivals, and the rave scene was in full effect, that's really where I started to understand a little bit more. First MDMA, ecstasy, and actually getting to try it and just, you know, dancing like a loon, absolutely loving everybody. Hearing about other entheogens, but really still not really kind of like moving towards acid or mushrooms at all. I think I was actually quite old by the time I even had Hoffman's acid. Yeah, I think that might actually have been like late 90s. Really, I was really quite old. But it was only when I came back to, so I moved to Ghana about 20 years, no, I had my son 18 years ago, moved back to Ghana like 11 years ago. When I came back to look after my mum. She wasn't very well. She didn't get much better till a lot later, and I had to give up my shop, my flat. I think I had 2 shops in Ghana at the time. I had to give everything up, and we were stuck here, and it felt like stuck here because that had not been the plan, and all my savings were gone. So I just couldn't kind of move from the situation that I was in. And I just found myself to be really, really unhappy. But as I always say, kind of really unhappy, but not so depressed that I wanted to take anything from the doctors. I'd already kind of wasn't that type of a person. And so I tried St. John's wort, which was really good, but I knew I needed more. I needed something else. I needed something more fundamental. Then I was led to Cambo, the frog medicine, and with Cambo, I think that's when the door really opened, because with Cambo, before I got to Cambo, I really then learned about plant medicine. Mostly I'd learned about ayahuasca, but where to go, who to go to, you know, it looked impossible. And so I actually ended up, and I knew I wanted something from Africa. There just seemed to be a call. And I thought, well, if this has come from the South American jungles, there's bound to be, you know, Africa is still connected to the mother in terms of right down to the solid part of the earth. So there has to be. So I actually Googled African ayahuasca, and then Iboga came up. And once I read about Iboga, I also realized that was more probably what I needed at that time, because I knew I needed something quite strong and sturdy, and maybe kind of like less floaty, dreamy. Although since that time, and I know more people who have taken ayahuasca, I realized that the vision I had of it wasn't quite what, you know, what I thought. I think both medicines are equally good if you're looking at working on yourself. But I had more of a draw towards Iboga. And when I started working with it, the person who I took it with, she gets you to microdose for at least 2 months before. Because of the situation in the UK at the time, can't remember why, I ended up microdosing for 4 to 6 months before we could actually take the medicine. And I think it was absolutely brilliant. It was really, really, really good for dealing with so many things before actually getting to the point of taking the flood dose. And I think for me that was really, really, really important. But the more I was learning all the way along, the more I was just kind of like, oh my God, these are what the world need. And these are what we as a people of African and African Caribbean people, these are what we need, because no one's got time for 7 years of therapy, especially while we're in a world that isn't actually letting up, you know, in terms of the daily microaggressions, the atmosphere of it all around. As Neely Fuller says, you know, the world is this system. There isn't a corner of the world that you can go and hide in that isn't under this system, and it's relentless. So it's like normal therapy is almost, it isn't adequate, because if you're a battered wife escaping from an evil partner and then getting therapy, well, you're out of the situation. If you're still in it getting therapy, you need something really big. And I really have come to believe that this is what the world needs, and this is what we need in particular, for sure.
Okay, great, thank you. Again, there's a lot coming out of that. We're definitely going to be doing a part 2, and if you're open to just delving deeper into, you know, because it sounds like very similar to what I say about my initial experiences with the plants and all, you know, the various fungi, organisms, just ultimately being allowed to, feeling comfortable, being ready to drop my load, and realizing how much that's allowed me to free up. And then you just realize, man, if it's doing this for me and it's doing it for other people, why the hell wouldn't you want to get this through to other people? And you become a pied piper, so to speak, an advocate for everybody at the end of the day. But it really hits home when you look at, you know, our story of people of African heritage and how we've ended up in this part of the world, going through what we've gone through. that end up living in Somers Town with the NF down the street, you know, not making you feel comfortable when you're going down to school or you're going to your local market, and just the impact, the loads that you pick up over the years that you may not be conscious of. And psychedelics bring it to the forefront, allow you to see it for what it is, as well as allow you to drop the load so you can move forward and you don't have hang-up issues that are holding you back. So yes, definitely, for sure, it's something that you would want to encourage everybody, and especially when you hone into some of the specific challenges that people face, and you realize how specific it can be in solving the problems, or getting closer to solving those problems that you may have been carrying for years. So thank you for sharing that, and hopefully we can come back to that and delve into that a bit more, and I'll be happy to have other people do the same as well, because I think that's what it's about, our testimonies that give people hope and encouragement. Because just like you, my first in understanding of these things was of the white guys I went to school with in Camden. I went to school, in secondary school in Camden, and they were saying exactly the same thing. Bro, I was up the heath at the weekend, we popped some pills and some acid and some mushrooms. We saw aliens. The trees were talking to us, and I'm like, yeah, these guys are crazy. And that's what I'm saying. But little did I know there was, there's healing in all of that and all the rest of it. And they may not have been the best advocates, the best custodians of the technology to be, to be handed over from. And maybe that's why it took for you and myself years later before we revisit those things in the way that we did, because then we see it for what it truly can offer us and others.